First, I want to congratulate all of you. It's an exciting experience. I can remember 1990 when I had never been to Tallahassee. I don't know whether any of you have never been to Tallahassee, but I had never been to Tallahassee when I got elected in 1990. And I remember two pieces of advice I got. Governor Childs was the governor at the time, and he had all of the freshmen elected representatives over for dinner at the governor's mansion. And the advice he gave us was, young men and women, congratulations. When you go back home, always tell them how you voted on a bill. But he said, never tell them why you voted, how you voted on a bill, because over time, the reasons why you voted for the bill or against the bill might change. So tell them how you voted, but don't tell them why. I thought that was interesting advice, and I've tried to take that to heart. And the other piece of information I got in one of the first really contentious political issues. I was a freshman, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal politically. It was a big deal for leadership, and I stood up to try to be recognized with all these titans that had been around the legislature. We didn't have term limits back then, so people that had been there for 30 years, and I stood up, and my mentor looked back at me and she said, Feeney, what are you doing? You don't need to be speaking on this until you get your feet wet and find your way around this place. And I said, no, Representative, I think it's really important. My constituents care about this issue, and I'm afraid if I don't say something, they'll think I'm ignorant about the issue. And she said, well, it's better that they suspect you're ignorant about the issue than you go ahead and prove it in your first week in the Capitol. So it was good advice. And after I introduce you, I'm going to sit down and we're just going to have a conversational Q&A. But it really is, it's an exciting time when you're first elected. I also happen to eventually end up in Congress and can remember dinner with the Speaker of the House and the rotunda with candlelights. But you'll have a great experience. In the old days, we made a lot of lifetime friends in both parties. I mean, some of the rules and the traditions have changed a little bit, and some of us think some of the changes are good, but retrospectively, a lot of us been around for a while would say there's some downsides to not being able to be cordial and friendly and do fact-gathering trips without a lot of scrutiny. And of course, we didn't have cameras following us around 24/7. I wouldn't have made it to my first re-elect if we'd had cameras following everything I said or did. My press team is here keeping an eye on me as we speak. They know. So, but thank you for being here. I wanted to first introduce Joe Casillo, who was elected without opposition to House District 90. He will represent part of Palm Beach County. Most recently, he served as a Boynton Beach City Commissioner, so he's had some experience in office. He has a passion for public service. He wants to continue to make a positive difference for the residents of Palm Beach County. Some of his priorities are enhancing public safety, supporting the local economy, improving the education system, and creating jobs. Next, we have Javier Fernandez, who took House District 114 during a special election in May, so he's actually had a little bit of acclamation, although that was after the session. Yeah. He's now running for re-election to continue to represent part of Miami-Dade County and our state capital. Representative Fernandez is a practicing attorney who had served as an advocate in the nonprofit sector as chief of staff to the mayor of the city of Miami. The son of a teacher, Representative Fernandez is focused on access to quality public education, prioritizing state investments in the areas of transportation and affordable housing, as well as addressing climate change and sensible gun reform. And then finally, we have with us Jose Tomko, the youngest candidate to win a House seat since Adam Putnam, and I was there to welcome Adam when he got elected in 1996. Representative Tomko was first elected in a special election in May and is now running for re-election to the House District 39 seat. It covers parts of Osceola and Polk counties. You didn't have to come here as far as the other gentleman. A cattle rancher from Polk City, Representative Tomko is focused on enforcing the rule of law, standing up for the Second Amendment, and growing Florida's economy. Welcome to all of you. And why don't we start with Joe and say a few words of introduction. Tell us a little bit about your background, Joe, and tell us why you think that background has prepared you and will help inform your priorities and decisions in Tallahassee. And I'll come join you guys.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm originally from Massachusetts. I was a career firefighter up there for 30-plus years. And upon my retirement, we came down here and settled down into the Boynton Beach area, down in West Palm Beach County. At that time, I was always active, behind-the-scenes type guy back in Massachusetts, politically, always getting involved. I was the guy holding the sign, signing up the voters and that. So always politically active, but always behind the scenes. Well, when I came down here to Boynton Beach, approximately 10 years ago now, all heck was breaking loose. Our mayor had got indicted. One of our city commissioners had to resign for some improper behavior. We had 5 police officers arrested. It was just chaos in the city of Boynton Beach. And I said to my wife, we can't. We're invested here. This is going to be our retirement. This is our new adopted home. We've got to try to do something. So in those open seats there was a special election. And I put my hat in the ring, and I won that special election by a total of 3 votes. In football terms, that's a field goal. Wow. So very fortunate, and for the past 6 years, I've done very well in every election and continue to sit there on the city commission. House District 90 opened up, as some of you might know, when Clemens had to resign from the Senate. Laurie Berman, whose House District 90 was, then ran for that special election and was successful. Seat opened up, and I've always been, once again, being a city commissioner and politically involved in the circles, the Democratic circles, like the Republican circles. I was always active. I was fortunate enough and humbled to run unopposed. That's hard to do nowadays, and I think you would all agree up here, to run for a state representative seat unopposed. And I was fortunate to do that. And it puts me in a position where I am here today. I hope that, I'm not a big believer of the D's and the R's. I think my skills are based on common sense decisions, to build coalitions, to work across that aisle. I think we all have, I think this will probably be the only time we'll have the majority of the Democrats sitting at a table here. So we'll take full advantage of that. That we'll take full advantage of that. But, I think we all want the things that are best for Florida and for our families and for our children. And the only way we're going to accomplish that is to be able to have these dialogues and these conversations. Who doesn't want clean water? Everyone wants clean water. Who doesn't want a good education for their children? Who doesn't want to feel safe in their own homes? We all have those common interests that we can work on. And I hope that, when we get to Tallahassee, we'll be able to have those conversations. I know when I get to Tallahassee, one of my first things I'm going to do, I'm going to make some Republican friends. That's my goal up there, okay? So we can have this dialogue, this open dialogue. I'm more of a centrist Democrat. I'm not far left, and I'm not far right. And as I get older, I get more conservative, I'm finding myself. I don't know, that just probably comes with age. But so that's where I'm at politically in the spectrum. I think that we have a lot of common issues that we can have that conversation about, and I'm anxious to get up there and to have them. Thank you.
Okay, well, will be more than happy to be one of your first Republican friends. So my name is Josie Tomko, and I got into this race when Neil Cumbie resigned to take his appointment with President Trump. And I feel like my life has kind of set me up to this point. I was always very involved politically from a very early age. Growing up in agriculture, it's all hands on deck all the time. And so from a very early age, I was making business decisions with my family for what's best for our employees and it just opened up my eyes, and I wanted to make sure that I was involved because my dad, being a good old country boy, says, why am I going to go speak to politicians? They're not doing anything for me. And I said, well, because if you want to make sure that your priorities are heard, you have to go up there and speak to them. So from the age of 16, I would go every year to Tallahassee and to DC with various organizations, and I would go and speak to legislators. And I saw the importance of sharing your story. I saw the importance of establishing those relationships. And as many say, you catch the Tallahassee bug. And so I just love my area where I grew up. I'm a 7th generation Floridian and 3rd generation in the cattle industry. And I knew that we needed someone to step forward and someone to follow Neil Cumby because he was a well-liked person in Tallahassee. And it happened really early. I did not assume it would happen this time in my life. But my favorite saying is, when man plans, God laughs, because he has a plan for you. And so this has been the year of the campaign for me. I was actually just telling friends a little bit ago that November 6th was around the time that I filed last year to run. And it's been a very unique time to go through an election and not really have an opportunity to go to Tallahassee and make a difference. So I know you can relate to this,
Absolutely.
but going through your campaign, everything that happened during session was directly impacting my campaign. So that's what we heard knocking on doors, was priority issues that people were reading about in the paper and people were seeing on TV. So it was a very unique time. And I will say, like you were saying, being friends with Democrats and Republicans is a big thing. And I actually had someone ask me a question and when I was speaking to a group, and they said, why can't Democrats and Republicans be friends? And I said, well, quite frankly, and with all due respect, you guys are the problem. And they said, why? I said, because the first time you see a Republican talking to a Democrat, you think that their mind is compromised and that their policy has changed. And I said, it's important to have those friendships. And so, like you said, I will be your first Republican friend up in Tallahassee, and I'm excited to work with you guys and just excited to see what's to come.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks to Tom and AIF for including me on the panel. Happy to be here. My name's Javier Fernandez. I'm the state representative for District 114 and was fortunate to win a special election here on May 1st and serving out the balance of the term, and hope to be reelected again this November for a full 2-year term. My story is not too different from everybody else's here on the panel. I got roped into this because about probably November of 2016 was approached by House Victory, had been working with a local network of candidates, or a group called New Leaders Council in Miami-Dade, on which I was on the advisory board, part of my kind of civic activities that really bleed into my platform very directly. And had introduced a few folks to House Victory and was asked by the party to consider running. I was very clear I would not be relocating to a new district to run, not important enough for me. I've got a young family. We live 3 blocks from my kid's home. My wife's 6 blocks from her office. She's not going to have any of that. So I jokingly told Reggie Cardozo, that who is the director for House Victory, that if my seat ever opened up, that I'd happily run in 114, knowing that Daisy Baez had just been elected, and that was probably not going to happen for a very long time. So lo and behold, on about November 7th, when the rumors started to percolate about her possible resignation, I got a call and was asked to consider doing this. And I just joined a fantastic law firm at Holland & Knight, probably the best place I could practice locally for my land use practice. And so had to think about it for a few days and decided to make the jump. And for me, it was a decision driven really by 2 personal experiences. One, in my own business life. I've worked at the intersection of law and government for the last 9 years as a practicing land use attorney. And in my native community, we've got a lot of challenges. And one issue that Tallahassee has really been silent on, and not just in the purest sense of climate change, but a lot of issues related to it, is climate change. And we're starting to see in our local economy conversations in the lending and insurance community percolate about what the long-term investment horizon looks like for my community. As someone who lives and dies by what happens in our real estate market, I want to make sure that it's a strong local market. We're taking all the necessary proactive steps as a state, as a local community, to make sure that it remains a sound investment opportunity for both folks from the U.S. and abroad. So that was reason number one. And the second reason was born of my mom's personal experience. I was lucky to be raised by a very strong woman, educator, 42 years in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, raised 4 kids on her own, did that on a teacher's salary, gave us every opportunity we could want in life. I was fortunate to study away from home, come back to Miami, do that on a couple of occasions, work in and out of the local market. And kind of assessing what was happening in Miami, that seems to be a much harder hill to climb these days for teachers, for working families generally. The cost of living has skyrocketed back home. Wages have been stagnant. I want to be kind of a voice in the legislature for those families born of that personal experience to see how we can kind of help lessen the burden on their day-to-day existence. So that's really my motivation to running. There are a lot of other issues I've got a deep passion for: affordable housing, transportation, and happy to be here and have a conversation with you about any topics that you'd like.
Well, great, and thank you for all of you for sharing a little bit about your background. AIF has a extremely broad membership. I mean, the only thing that is common amongst our members is that they are employers. They are people that hire folks. So I like to joke that if you get out the business section of the Yellow Pages, if they exist anymore, we all use computers and the internet now. AIF represents businesses from aerospace to xylophone manufacturers. And so one of our mission is to be the preeminent advocate in the state of Florida to promote Florida as a great place to hire people and a great place for people to find jobs. So I'd like to start with Joe maybe. And so do you have some ideas for, Florida's got a very low unemployment rate. Our economy is doing better than it was during the Great Recession. But there are lots of challenges. You sort of alluded to wages, and so underemployment is a bigger problem than unemployment. And so do you have some ideas to help the business community that wants to be out there hiring more workers and growing?
For me?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sure.
Anybody?
Yeah. Actually, for me, it's plenty of life experiences, my day-to-day practice. I've been fortunate to work with developers in downtown Miami on some very large projects. Quite often, local governments, including people from my own party, will want to require some local hiring prerequisites in those contracts. And one of the struggles that we constantly encounter is the lack of skilled workforce, particularly in the construction trades. And I'm sure that's true among any number of industry sectors we could talk about. I can tell you, I think our current workforce development system in Florida does not work well. I think I'd like to have conversations with many of you about how we can re-envision how that works. I think, frankly, it would be more productive if we thought about working and directly encouraging, subsidizing employers to take on people who are probably lacking in some skill sets and pay you all the same amount of money we're paying into that system to train them directly on the job, as opposed to the way the system works currently. More of those apprenticeship programs, on-the-job training programs where we are kind of tailoring the opportunities to existing employment in the marketplace, I think would probably yield much better results. That's just one thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our organization is very big into STEM education, and doesn't necessarily mean college degrees or master's degrees. The certifiable skill sets really are transferable amongst many different industry lines, and whether it's our trucking association or whether it's our technology or healthcare companies, you mentioned construction, and when there's boom years in construction, they just can't find the workers with the skill sets that are necessary. And so, we're glad to hear that matching the education system's ability to deal with what real employers actually need is important for our organization, but it's also important for the health of Florida going forward. So, Representative Tomko, do you want to share some thoughts on?
Absolutely. So I think, like you were saying, apprenticeships and being able to offer vocational training, I think that there's a stigma, and a lot of people think that in order to be successful, you have to go to college for a certain amount of time, when that might not be in the path for multiple people. And so I think that there are various educational opportunities that we should promote, and vocational training being one of those, because you learn the on-the-job training skill set that you need to work for your employers. And I know, as someone coming out of college, and when you're applying for jobs and you see that there's requirements of 2 years worth of experience in a certain field, and you almost say, well, how do you even start that? How do you get that 2 years training? How do you get that 2 years under your belt? And so that's where the apprenticeship programs come through. And I think that as someone who's a big advocate to have people mentor others in a direct field that you're trying to get your foot in, I think that that's where it starts in the apprenticeships and vocational training, to promote those, because that's when we'll have a quality skill set of workers that are able to go out there and day one know exactly what they need to do to be successful, and also to have their employers be successful too.
Yep, Joe?
Well, what I didn't tell you in my introduction is that I am a product of vocational education. And with that vocational education, I operated an electrical contracting business in Massachusetts, where I had 3 vans and approximately 9 individuals working in the electrical trade, doing residential and light commercial, with the tagline, "Our prices won't shock you." But how did I get there? How did I get there? You know, I have 3 younger sisters, and they're all, one's a medical doctor, the others have PhDs. And report card time was always a tough time for me at the dinner table, because they always outshine me. And one day my dad looked at me and said, "Son, you're not going to be a doctor or a rocket scientist. You really should consider vocational school." And I took him up on that. And I did quite well, and it served me well. And as a city commissioner in Boynton Beach, you might have heard or not that we're redoing our downtown area. We're recreating a whole new downtown area, $250 million of new construction. And what we advocated for is local hires and apprentice programs to help build these buildings that we're building in downtown. So, as my colleagues over here on my left had mentioned, it is so important. And it's not all about a 4-year degree from college in high student debt when you get out, and it takes years and years to pay off, okay? I tell you, I did pretty well as an electrician, and plumbers do even better. And I should have took plumbing. But with that being said, I would advocate for the STEM programs are great. I think that's important, but not everyone needs to go to college. And, we have a vocational school in the Boynton Beach area called South Tech, and we heavily promote that down there. And when these students get out, they're ready to, put on that tool belt and earn a good, decent wage.
Yeah, and so vocational skills are very important to all of our businesses. There's the famous story about, an emergency problem in somebody's bathroom, and so the plumber came out on a weekend late in the evening, showed up at the door, fixed the problem in about 10 minutes, and it was a $200 bill. And so the customer looked at him and said, "Look, I practice law, and I make $400 an hour. But 10 minutes for $200, that's ridiculous. I don't make that much practicing law." And the plumber looked at him and said, "I didn't make that much practicing law either. That's why I'm a plumber." It sort of is a good way to say that you don't have to go through the traditional long-term education system. So I'd like to ask, maybe we can start with Joe this time, in terms of what types of committees would you be most interested? I mean, at any given time, there are 20 or 25 substantive committees, and obviously that's up ultimately to the speaker. Sometimes when I was speaker, I solicited the advice and support of the minority leader, Congressman Lois Frankel. But to the extent you have some input in your requests, and I'm sure you're going to be asked if you haven't been already, have you sort of thought about, with so many issues that Florida has to deal with, what your preferences would be?
Appropriations, appropriations, and appropriations. Look, I make no, we joke about that, but I understand the, where we stand in the food chain up there in Tallahassee. I think one of my big ones is going to be the education. Try to get on education. The education system here in Florida, in my opinion, it's been the dumbing down of the education. We've been, there's an attack on the teachers, how the education system is run, how the we're, what, 4,000, in Palm Beach County, we are 4,000 teachers short. They can't find teachers to fill these slots. The starting pay is low, the benefits are not that great, and the classroom sizes are oversized. So I think that, I would focus on education at this particular point, and try to make that one of my priorities. The others that I'm sure will be given to me in one form or another, but education is going to be, the K through 12 is really where I would like to put my efforts.
Great. Representative?
So my area and my district is very diverse. So I have parts of Osceola County as well as Polk County. So you go all around the district and everyone has different priorities. And so I want to make sure that when I'm going up there, I'm representing my district well and my committees reflect that. So I would love to sit on an education committee, whether it be higher ed or K through 12. I just think that it's super important in my area. We have Polytechnic and Polk State Community College, and it's just important that we promote school choice and we promote educational opportunities. And as someone whose background is agriculture, I would love to sit on an agriculture and natural resource committee. I want to make sure that we're protecting our natural resources and that we have someone sitting at that table that's family actually has a stake in the game, and that I hope that I can be a voice for the farmers and ranchers all over the state as well as in my area. And also with the Osceola side, tourism's a huge thing. We have Celebration in my district, and so a lot of the people that live in Celebration work in Disney and various places. And so I want to make sure that I kind of have my hand in it all. And as you were saying, obviously leadership kind of determines where you fall, but I'm going up to Tallahassee to be a team player, and I want to make sure that I am doing what's best for my district and as well as the state. And I think the speaker will see what's best fit, so.
Great. Javier?
Sure. So appropriations as well would be a priority, particularly I think it's transportation and utilities. It's the subcommittee. Given all the mobility challenges back home, important to be, I think, at that, have a seat at that table potentially. Commerce, banking, and insurance would be another subcommittee. I've had some experience related to insurance and banking and some advocacy work early on in my career, so I thought would be the benefit of bringing that experience to the table there. And then apparently people tell me I'm a glutton for punishment because I have an interest in finance and tax, or ways and means nowadays. So, but I heard that's not terribly sexy or fun. So, I don't know.
It depends. If we're doing big tax reform,
Yeah,
it can
yeah.
be. Well, some of you touched on economic development. One of the hot issues in Tallahassee, which isn't always a partisan issue, is the question of economic development and incentives. Different states do different things. Florida's legislature only meets 60 days a year, other than special sessions. So it is hard when you have an opportunity to get a big contractor to put a new project. A lot of times, by the way, this happens in aerospace or defense. So major companies get a billion or a multi-billion-dollar contract, and they have to decide where to go build a facility or rent a facility and put the jobs. There are lots of things that go into that equation. We talked about skilled workforce, but the dilemma that Florida's had from the time I was in Tallahassee, and even when my friend Jeb was governor and I was Speaker of the House, is how do you develop a system that's accountable, that actually finds ways to incentivize businesses to move here. Texas, Georgia, Alabama all have closing funds where the governor can write a check on short notice if he thinks it's a high priority. Governor Scott, as you've probably heard, is very supportive of having a fund that he can successfully use on short notice to help develop jobs. Speaker Corcoran, and I think likely Speaker Oliva, they take the viewpoint that when you target an individual industry, it is in effect, quote, corporate welfare. So the dilemma is somewhere in between, not picking winners and losers and handing a check to one company, but also not handicapping Florida, because like it or not, our companies not only compete with their competitors, they compete with their international locations, where to put that next facility or plant. So our Florida leaders for major companies are competing within their own company. Does the project go to California or Texas? And transportation, workforce are all important, but do you have any thoughts on how to design? Because it's a dilemma, candidly, we haven't solved in Tallahassee to universal satisfaction?
Oh, I think tax incentives are important to get a company, but I also believe in getting back to the education thing. I think you need the workforce to support those companies before they even consider coming here. And I think that's one of our biggest dilemmas as far as getting brand name big companies to come to Florida is the workforce that will support it. We can give, for brick and mortar the structure, that's easy enough to do, but how do you fill those structures with educated, workforce that would promote that business? So I think it's a two-headed type question, education, workforce, and some sort of tax, I don't like to call it welfare, corporate welfare. I think that's a stigma that we shouldn't put on anything, really. But tax incentives, I think, play an important part, as far as getting businesses to relocate.
So I agree. I think that promoting education and making sure we have a strong workforce is number one key, because if we have that workforce and we have jobs for them here, they'll stay. And that's the thing that happens with a lot of kids and people that are coming out of college that have a degree and they received that degree and Florida's put so much into them and they've gotten their education here. It's a matter of how do we keep them here? And I think that Florida is the greatest state, and I credit that to our fiscal health. And I think it's important that we level the playing field and let businesses come, and we make sure that we decrease taxes and that we have a strong education system that's going to be filing those people out into our workforce. But I think it's definitely a problem that we're going to have to figure out a solution to. And like you said, we've been working on it for a while. So it's a matter of just starting those conversations and throwing different ideas out.
So I've actually spent quite a bit of my career negotiating incentive deals, so particularly with local community reinvestment agencies in downtown Miami. And one project I've been fortunate to work on is Miami World Center, which is a $3 billion real estate project on 30 acres that for my entire lifetime has been, basically underdeveloped land right in the heart of our downtown. And I'll tell you that for roughly a $60 million investment, which was all for infrastructure, the city was able to finally close a deal that's going to bring $3 billion of new investment, not counting conference center hotel, which will help anchor a lot of activity. We're hoping we'll get done here in the next year or so in downtown Miami and really leverage a lot of other public investment around transportation and that infrastructure in particular, creating a really new hub, which has made us, frankly, one of the finalist sites for Amazon, HQ2 competition. One of the challenges, though, in kind of building on that momentum is exactly what Joe mentioned, which is the lack of quality public school options in Miami-Dade County. Now, that's a perceived problem as much as a real problem. But when you're trying to attract multinational companies headquartered in states like New Jersey, we had one company that was potentially going to be an anchor tenant in a 500,000 square foot office building. When they inventory their own employees, the one thing they kept hearing is, well, where can we send our kids in Miami-Dade County to a quality public school? What are the options? We know what we get in New Jersey. It is a higher tax state. But we're happy to pay because we get pretty good options in terms of public education. So they ended up not coming. So I think we do need to address, it's got to be complementary strategies. I think we do need a robust incentive program. I think a closing fund, just given the environment that we're competing in, is absolutely necessary. I'd be a strong advocate for it. Whether it's a Republican governor or a Democratic governor, I think we do need to give them some amount of delegated authority to help close those deals, as they're all contingent on time. Time is a tremendously valuable thing in business. And then I would tell you my own personal experience. I think it's been a tremendous, our state's tremendous detriment not to have reauthorized our Florida Film Credit Program. I've seen in my home community what it's done to help really bring in an industry that pays very high wages, has all sorts of other residual, wonderful economic development opportunities around it as well. A lot of direct and indirect spending that it generates in the local economy. And for a very modest investment there, I think Florida could compete with Atlanta, could compete with Louisiana, could compete with places in Canada that right now are drawing the lion's share of productions outside of Los Angeles, given just the balance of our natural assets.
We need to let, John Lux was here yesterday from Florida's film advocacy community. We need to, I don't see him today, we need to let him know, Javier, of your interest in that, because it's something that, we think done right. there are places in Georgia where they are recreating palm trees so that they can film a shoot that would have otherwise been shot where the palm trees really are in Miami. And so there are, again, it's that nuance. How do you help companies when you can make a positive difference, return on investment? How do you make those decisions? And I want to see if there's a question or two from the audience, but as I do, in our organization, we have hundreds of members. We also have about 75 associations that are members. So we're like a business roundtable of different business groups. The cattlemen are members of ours, and the nursery growers, and the roofing and sheet metal guys, the anesthetists, the beer distributors. So very diverse. A lot of our members are executives in their companies. Some of them, their expertise is in government relations and community affairs. So, lobbyists get a bad name, but other than, Joe, I don't think either one of you have actually been elected to office. Have you?
I have been, but I'm running again.
Oh, you're running again.
We both
The year-long campaign.
Year-long campaign.
Yeah.
But this is really your first position in elected office.
Yes, first
So-
time, yes, absolutely.
So you guys, as you're starting to understand, Florida's a very complex, you're essentially the board of directors for a $75 billion enterprise. And workers' compensation is complicated. Land use, which you have expertise in, is complicated. How to deal with education. Every voter I've ever met in my life is an expert in education because they spent 12 years sitting in a classroom seat. So everybody thinks they know how to fix it. But the question is relating to the business community and the outside organizations. There are some lobbyists that are bad actors, but when done right, lobbyists are full of expertise, and if they impart that expertise, it can help inform decisions, because nobody can be an expert in all $75 billion worth of Florida's budget, let alone all the things we don't have resources. So how do you intend to ask us to help inform you and work with you as you make decisions? And Joe's got his hand up, but all of you can respond.
Lobbyists, they are the mother's milk of politics. We need lobbyists. Let's be honest about that, okay? I'm not an expert in my field. I can't say I'm an expert in any field. But I come to you with common sense. And I have enough common sense to sit down with you, the individuals who are the experts, and give me both sides of the argument. Why the pro and the con. Why it would be a good idea to move this bill forward, a fireless bill, or why it wouldn't, okay? And then base my judgment on, my common sense to weigh that. But for us as, elected officials, I come from, I've been a city commissioner, and I've dealt with, issues like that where we had to make some tough decisions, okay? So I've had some experience in that. And I can tell you that it's, not always your idea that solves the problem. It's a team effort. And with that being said, it's the experts, you, the people out there, the CEOs of your companies, that bring that information to us to base, so we can base our decisions on good, sound advice. And I think that's all you can ask for from a legislator, to have their ear, and that's what lobbyists do. They have the politician's ear, okay, to state your case, and then we can go from there.
So, as someone who has worked in government relations before, I see how imperative it is to have people like you up in Tallahassee to inform us. And it's like you said, I cannot be an expert on any one topic, and that's why I rely on the lobbyists in Tallahassee to relay that message. And so the average worker, the average constituent in my district cannot come to Tallahassee to advocate on behalf of what they feel passionate about. And that is your job. That is what your specific interest in doing, is benefiting the people who you represent. And for me, I respect someone who comes up and tells me who's on the opposing side, why, and why you're where you are. And that's where I get respect, is when someone can give me all sides of the argument and is going to shoot it straight with me. And in Tallahassee, I'm someone who is going to have an open door policy always. And I just think that relationships and having that communication and connection is what makes everyone successful. And there are bad actors in every field. There are bad actors in the cattle business. There's bad actors in everything that you do, but there are also great people and people that are there for pure intentions, and that is to make sure that our state continues to be the best state in the nation.
So I'm actually, as a Lane's attorney, I often register as a lobbyist back home.
Yeah.
So I struggled with that issue during my own campaign, where I was attacked by my opponent, anonymous third-party organizations, for being a registered lobbyist. Also was attacked for being a Democrat who's actually written checks to Republicans in the past. Probably the only Democrat they cycle attack for being too close to Donald Trump, apparently, so for doing that. But, I think in my experiences, in my own personal practice, you're only as good as the information you're providing as a lobbyist, and if you're able to honor your word. And so to echo comments made, I think we appreciate, I try to, as in my own practice, make sure I'm sharing with a member, city council member, all sides of the story, communicating transparently, consistently, and appreciate when people keep an open mind. We understand there are outside factors and politics often play into the decision making, sometimes just not just based on the merits of the argument exclusively, but knowing where they're at, knowing where, what's driving their decision making, all helps me provide better service to my clients. And I understand that from your perspective, what you want is a similar relationship. So you have my commitment as we work together to have an open door, listen, and I'll be very direct as to where I'm at or not at on a particular issue, and share that feedback so you can relay that back to your principals and obviously make whatever adjustments in your strategy you need to.
Yeah, in 18 years of public service, I got an earful when I'd go home to town halls about the nefarious lobbyists, and given the reality of things, I try to remind them that everybody I know lobbies me. My wife lobbies me because she wants to go out to dinner or get a dress. My sons lobby me when they want to go get, some new video game. And when I get home today, after a long 3 days, the first thing that'll happen is my son's puppy will have a tennis ball in her mouth, wagging her tail, and all she wants to do is lobby me till I go out and throw the ball to her. So, but they don't get paid to lobby me. So I thought we would take a question or two from the audience. It's great to have new members sort of reflect on the opportunity they have. All of them have the chance to spend 8 years in the House if they continue to get reelected. We see many cases where folks go on and become senators. I was Speaker of the House when we had 63 freshmen, plus Mario Diaz-Balart came back from the Senate, so basically 60, a red shirt freshman is what I used to call Mario. And I said at the time on my opening day, I said, out there in the audience today, I'm sure there's going to be future governors, House speakers, Senate presidents, and congressmen. And sure enough, about 3 of them are in Congress. Jeff Atwater was a member of that class. Mike Herodopoulos was a member of that class, Senate presidents. Of course, we've got Senator Rubio was in that class, and a number of congressmen. So getting perspective of people on their way in and getting to meet them is important for Florida's business community. Do we have a question or two? I can tell you, I want to touch on health care and insurance, which are something we haven't talked about. But do we have a question or two before we wrap up and then move on to Ryan? Yeah. So one of the things AIF does is we involve partners in every arena of transportation. And so Ken represents the Trucking Association of Florida. Every one of our major retailers has trucks or relies on trucks, every business. We had a discussion yesterday about supply chain disruption as a consequence of Hurricane Florence, which may not impact Florida directly, but the supply chain from the rail system to the Trucking Association. Rick Morrell represents Tropical Shipping. He just shared with us yesterday that he's got a ship full of French fries that isn't going to make its way out of port. So if you can't find French fries this weekend, it's...
Send them my way.
So
I love French fries.
We care about every aspect of transportation. We've got car builders, we've got technology companies like Uber. We care about the future of transportation. We're woefully underfunded for the needs we have, but every one of our companies, whether they're in healthcare and transporting people or whether they're transporting product, is dependent. We have a big event coming up at Port Canaveral in December. We will involve for the first time commercial space, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and those types of folks. The United States Department of Transportation, and to their credit, the Florida Department of Transportation actually are treating space in the future as a transportation and commerce question. It's no longer just the Air Force versus NASA, it's the civilian versus the military side. It's really evolving into largely private sector driven. So your thoughts on transportation in general, obviously in South Florida you have some different sets of problems. Representative Tomko, you and I spent a lot of time stuck on I-4,
Oh, yeah.
but
The I-4 corridor.
there are times Route 95 isn't any better in South Florida. So do you have some thoughts about transportation prompted by Ken?
Oh, I would say, I think we've been redoing our ports over. We've been dredging our ports so bigger ship containers can come in. Now, how do you get that product from A to B? Maybe we could deliver those French fries by drone. I don't know. I doubt it. But I think we really got to start seriously thinking, I'm a 95 guy, I-95 guy. I won't drive 95, and that's why my lovely wife is sitting over there in the audience, because she had to drive me up here. I will not drive on 95 for the infrastructure of 95 itself is dangerous. You get some of those big 18-wheel rigs going up and down, it becomes even more dangerous. But to the issue and to the problem is that I think that we've got to either do more with our infrastructure to allow for more vehicles, transportation, or do something with our rail system. I think our rail system is underused as far as getting our products from A to B, points A to B, and I think that's something we have to look at. Other than that, we're limited as far as our what the options could be as far as overland, getting your product out of port to where it needs, the destination where it needs to go.
Yep, go ahead.
Absolutely funding infrastructure and also prioritizing projects that are put into place. And as someone who gets stuck on I like to call it a parking lot, because honestly, that's what I-4 is it's a parking lot. My biggest thing is, how do we be proactive instead of reactive? So how do we anticipate, and I don't know the answer to that, so I would love to sit and talk with anyone who might have an idea, but how do we anticipate these, the people coming in, and I feel like we're always under construction, and so how do we make sure that we are being as proactive as possible with these projects instead of coming back and being reactive to problems that we're seeing?
So my experience with transportation is personal, both in terms of my daily commute and my business practice. I grew up in Southwest Miami-Dade and came back from college. I went to school in Maine, of all places, being a Miami native, a small college in Colby College. And coming into the workforce was a rude awakening enough, just kind of getting into that routine again. But when you had to sit in traffic an hour at the time from my mom's place when I first moved back in West Kendall to downtown Miami, I remember sitting in the car and calculating just how much time I was spending there on an annual basis, and figured I was 11 days if I worked 250 days that year, an hour in each direction, which was more time than I had for vacation. Unfortunately, in Miami-Dade County, that's probably the reality for most of the people in the workforce. Spend a lot more time commuting than they do in recreation. So it's a huge quality of life issue for people. It's also, when I talk about climate change and the environment, I really focus on transportation. In my mind, it's our biggest mitigation strategy. For every hour that we're in our cars sitting in those parking lots, it's 10 pounds of carbon that are going into the air. So as a state that's vulnerable in this area, I think it's important for us to look at transportation as a solution or as a mitigation strategy to address that future risk. In my personal practice, I was fortunate to work with Brightline and SFRTA in bringing, financing a station in downtown Miami to allow for some connectivity for what's hopefully going to be an emerging rail corridor to northeast Miami-Dade County. I will tell you that if all of our future transportation projects require the same amount of effort to move forward in terms of cobbling together the funding, we were talking about $50 million from 7 different funding sources, we're never going to get anything built in the state. So I think we need a much more aggressive state role in this area, recognizing that the federal government is withdrawing in terms of its financial support in the sector generally. The state, I think, needs to step up and really begin to figure out not only how we finance these things, but then require, putting on my land use hat, require when we do make the investments as a state that local communities allow us either cooperatively or through maybe preemption. It's probably the one area where I probably would be a fan of it, requiring minimum densities around these transit nodes so that communities can develop around them, and we're actually leveraging that investment, making sure that we're earning a return as a state and as a community on that investment statewide.
Well, very good. We're going to reconvene at 11. I wanted each of you to say a last couple words and let people know how they can reach you, how they can help your campaigns, if you still have technically campaigns, and then you'll have a few minutes, if you can, to mingle and say some hello. I'm sure some of our folks would like to say hello, but why don't you start, Joe, and we'll wrap up.
Well, thank you for inviting us up here today. It's been a great experience. When I first got here and was listening to, I thought it was a live version of Fox News, so I thought it was pretty good. It's always good to get a different perspective. I can tell you, I am going to Tallahassee. I'm in, and I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess. So you will be dealing with me up there for at least 2 years. And so with that being said, I just want to say that, my phone line and my door will always be open. You'll always be welcomed into my office. We can always have a conversation. It doesn't cost anything. It won't cost you anything to have a conversation with me. You're going to be my educators, if you will, up there, okay? Some of you will be my mentors up there as far as giving direction and ideas. And I think that's important. I think I've got a long ways to go to grow into, being comfortable what needs to be done in Tallahassee. I don't go up there with with the mantra that I am going to change the world. I'll probably have one of those cheap seats way back on the floor down there behind some posts. So, but I want to be relevant. I want to make some sort of difference. I want to have a voice, and the only way I can do that is being educated in my arguments. And it's the people, the experts in their fields, they're going to educate me to make me sound smarter anyway, up there in Tallahassee. So that's, once again, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. I can be reached at, I'll pass out my number after we get done speaking, but thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys so much for coming and sitting and listening to us and our ideas. And it's just what he said, open door policy always. I'm praying I make it to Tallahassee in January, have an election in November against the same guy that I ran against last go round. So we're battling it out again. But I just want to make sure that I have all the information that I need to be successful, and you give me all the information that you need to be successful as well, because that is what makes Tallahassee go round. And I just want to make sure that you know that I am willing to fight for my strong convictions, and if you have an issue that you feel passionate about, I will always hear you out. And I just can't thank you enough for your support, and see a lot of friends in the room, so thank you guys for coming.
Well, again, thank you for the invitation, Tom, and to AIF. I'm glad to be here this morning. I'll close by saying something I share on the doors with most folks. I mean, we're in a very heated political environment. People moving further and further apart at the extremes. And what I share with folks, particularly independents on the doors, my sincere belief that whatever we want to do as progressives, and I consider myself a progressive, really starts and ends with a strong economy. So all those aspirational goals that we have really are predicated on keeping Florida's economy strong. And so rest assured that if I am elected here in November again, which I expect to be, you'll have a partner that is, I think, business friendly by all accounts. Also wanted to mention that I've had very limited experience in the process. My experience was really working on behalf of a client, running a bill kind of as the technical drafter, working with Jeanette Nunez actually as the sponsor and Renee Garcia. And that experience was eye-opening. I think term limits really has made your role and the role of staff in the process extremely important for members. We're here for a very limited amount of time. I think we're going to rely more and more in this environment on your learned experience to help us achieve our prospective policy aims. So I see you all as a partner in the process, and I hope you'll see me the same way. And lastly, survived a very tough special election. Did not earn a free pass on into November. They couldn't beat me, so they decided to run someone with almost my same identical name. My full name is Javier Enrique Fernandez. I'm running against Javier Enriquez. So we do have a contested election. I feel very good about the response we're getting. People have seen us very recently, asking me why I'm back already, but glad to be back on the doors talking to people. But that all said, we can't take anything for granted. So if I'd be fortunate to have your support, if you want to spend some time with us on doors, welcome you to come out. I walk every evening. Actually, when I land today at 4:30, we'll be out knocking on my 60 doors for the evening. Feel free to come join us any day of the week or on the weekend, but also could use a little bit of your treasure if you're willing to spare it. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Well, thank all of you. We really appreciate it. Yeah, good job. Well done.